جرح الروح نبي روح جرح الروح نبي
Project Megiddo was a report researched and written by the United States' Federal Bureau of Investigation under Director Louis Freeh. The report, released on October 20, 1999, named followers of white supremacy groups, the Aryan Nation, the Ku Klux Klan, the Church of the Creator, the Christian Identity Churches, Odinism groups, the militia movement, the Black Hebrew Israelites, the Nation of Yahweh, Islamic, Jewish, and Christian militant fundamentalists, who believe in violence to accomplish theological goals and objectives, and apocalyptic cults, as potential terrorists who might become violent in reaction to the new millennium. The report began with,
for over 4,000 years, Megiddo, a hill in northern Israel, has been the site of many battles. Ancient cities were established there to serve as a fortress on the plain of Jezreel to guard a mountain pass. As Megiddo was built and rebuilt, one city upon the other, a mound or hill was formed. The Hebrew word Armageddon means hill of Megiddo. In English, the word has come to represent battle itself. The last book in the New Testament of the Bible designates Armageddon as the assembly point in the apocalyptic setting of God's final and conclusive battle against evil. The name Megiddo is an apt title for a project that analyzes those who believe the year 2000 will usher in the end of the world, and who are willing to perpetrate acts of violence to bring the end about.
the report's purpose was to warn other domestic law enforcement agencies to the potential for extremist criminal activity in the United States by individuals or domestic groups who attach special significance to the year 2000. The report also stated the threat posed by extremists as a result of perceived events associated with the year 2000 is very real. The volatile mix of apocalyptic religious and New World Order conspiracy theories may produce violent acts aimed at precipitating the end of the world as prophesied in the Bible. The groups named as potentially violent were biblically driven cults, militias, adherents of racist belief systems such as Christian Identity, Odinism, and other radical domestic extremists. Regarding the biblically driven cults, the report warned that less time spent on Bible study and more time spent on physical training indicates that the cult may be preparing for some type of action. The report ends by discussing the possibility of terrorist attacks in the city of Jerusalem, saying, the extreme terrorist fringes of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam are all present in the United States. Thus, millennial violence in Jerusalem could conceivably lead to violence in the United States as well. The report's section about its concerns regarding the nationalistic religious group known as the Black Hebrew Israelites states the following.
As the millennium approaches, radical fringe members of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement may pose a challenge for law enforcement. As with the adherents of most apocalyptic philosophies, certain segments of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement have the potential to engage in violence at the turn of the century. This movement has been associated with extreme acts of violence in the recent past, and current intelligence from a variety of sources indicates that extreme factions of Black Hebrew Israelite groups are preparing for a race war to close the millennium. Violent Black Hebrew Israelite followers can generally be described as proponents of an extreme form of black supremacy, drawing upon the teachings of earlier Black Hebrew Israelite adherents. Such groups hold that blacks represent God's true chosen people, while condemning whites as incarnate manifestations of evil. As God's authentic Jews, Black Hebrew Israelite adherents believe that mainstream Jews are actually imposters. Such beliefs bear a striking resemblance to the Christian identity church theology, practiced by many white supremacists. In fact, Tom Metzger, a renowned white supremacist, once remarked,
"They're the black counterpart of us."
Like their Christian identity church counterparts, militant Black Hebrew Israelite followers tend to see themselves as divinely endowed by God with superior status. As a result, some followers of this belief system hold that violence, including murder, is justifiable in the eyes of God, provided that it helps to rid the world of evil. Violent Black Hebrew Israelite groups are of particular concern as the millennium approaches, because they believe in the inevitability of a race war between blacks and whites. The extreme elements of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement are prone to engage in violent activity. As seen in previous convictions of Black Hebrew Israelite followers, adherents of this philosophy have a proven history of violence, and several indications point toward a continuation of this trend. Some Black Hebrew Israelite followers have been observed in public, donning primarily black clothing, with emblems and or patches bearing the Star of David symbol. Some Black Hebrew Israelite members practice paramilitary operations, and wear web belts and shoulder holsters. Some adherents have extensive criminal records for a variety of violations, including weapons charges, assault, drug trafficking, and fraud. In law enforcement circles, Black Hebrew Israelite groups are typically associated with violence and criminal activity, largely as a result of the movement's popularization by Yahweh Ben Yahweh, formerly known as Helon Mitchell Jr., and the Miami-based Nation of Yahweh. In reality, the origins of the Black Hebrew Israelite movement are non-violent. While the Black Hebrew Israelite belief system may have roots in the United States as far back as the Civil War era, the movement became more recognized as a result of the teachings of an individual known as Ben Ami Ben Israel, aka Ben Carter, from the south side of Chicago. Ben Israel claims to have had a vision at the age of 27, hearing a voice tell me that the time had come for Africans in America, the descendants of the biblical Israelites, to return to the land of our forefathers. Ben Israel persuaded a group of African Americans to accompany him to Israel in 1967, teaching that African Americans descended from the biblical tribe of Judah and therefore, that Israel is the land of their birthright. Ben Israel and his followers initially settled in Liberia, for the purposes of cleansing themselves of bad habits. In 1969, a small group of Black Hebrew Israelite followers left Liberia for Israel, with Ben Israel and the remaining original migrants arriving in Israel the following year. Public source estimates of the Black Hebrew Israelite community in Israel number between 1,500 and 3,000. Despite promoting non-violence, members of Ben Israel's movement have shown a willingness to engage in criminal activity. Black Hebrew Israelites in Israel are generally peaceful, if somewhat controversial. The FBI has no information to indicate that Ben Israel's Black Hebrew Israelite community in Israel is planning any activity, terrorist, criminal, or otherwise, inspired by the coming millennium. Ben Israel's claims to legitimate Judaism have at times caused consternation to the Israeli government. Black Hebrew Israelite adherents in Israel have apparently espoused anti-Semitic remarks, labeling Israeli Jews as imposters. Neither the Israeli government nor the Orthodox rabbinate recognize the legitimacy of Black Hebrew Israelite claims to Judaism. According to Jewish law, an individual can be recognized as Jewish if he or she was born to a Jewish mother, or if the individual agrees to convert to Judaism. At present, Black Hebrew Israelites in Israel have legal status as temporary residents, which gives them the right to work and live in Israel, but not to vote. They are not considered to be Israeli citizens. While Black Hebrew Israelite claims to Judaism are disregarded by Israeli officials and religious leaders, the Black Hebrew Israelite community is tolerated and appears to be peaceful. While the Black Hebrew Israelite community in Israel is peaceful, Black Hebrew Israelite adherents in the United States became associated with violence, thanks to the rise of the Nation of Yahweh, which reached the height of its popularity in the 1980s. The Nation of Yahweh was founded in 1979, and led by Yahweh Ben Yahweh. Ben Yahweh's followers viewed him as the Messiah, and therefore demonstrated unrequited and unquestioned obedience. Members of the organization engaged in numerous acts of violence in the 1980s, including several homicides, following direct orders from Ben Yahweh. 17 Nation of Yahweh members were indicted by a federal grand jury in Miami in 1990-91 on charges of RICO conspiracy, and various racketeering acts. Various members were convicted on RICO conspiracy charges, and remain imprisoned. While the overwhelming majority of Black Hebrew Israelite followers are unlikely to engage in violence, there are elements of this movement with both the motivation and the capability to engage in millennial violence. Some radical Black Hebrew Israelite adherents are clearly motivated by the conviction that the approach of the year 2000 brings society ever closer to a violent confrontation between blacks and whites. While the rhetoric professed by various Black Hebrew Israelite groups is fiery and threatening, there are no indications of explicitly identified targets for violence, beyond a general condemnation and demonization of whites and impostor Jews. Militant Black Hebrew Israelite groups tend to distrust the United States government. However, there are no specific indications of imminent violence toward the government.
On January 6, 2000, U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno said, in response to a question at a news conference, asking why the terrorist acts predicted in the report did not happen.
I think that's speculation as to why it didn't. The nice answer would be that there was no threat. What we must all do, I think, is make sure that we pursue situations consistent with the law, consistent with the process, that we take reasonable precautions, that when we have specific information that can inform the American people, that we advise them, and that America proceed in the way it has always proceeded, that it won't back down, that it won't be intimidated, that it will take reasonable precautions, and that we will see our laws honored.
The report concludes with the following.
Extremists from various ideological perspectives attach significance to the arrival of the year 2000, and there are some signs of preparations for violence. The significance of the new millennium is based primarily upon either religious beliefs relating to the apocalypse, Armageddon, or political beliefs relating to the New World Order conspiracy theory. The challenge to law enforcement is to understand these extremist theories, and if any incidents do occur, be prepared to respond to the unique crises they will represent. Law enforcement officials should be particularly aware that the new millennium may increase the odds that extremists may engage in proactive violence, specifically targeting law enforcement officers. Religiously motivated extremists may initiate violent conflicts with law enforcement officials in an attempt to facilitate the onset of Armageddon, or to help fulfill a prophecy. For many on the extreme right wing, the Battle of Armageddon is interpreted as a race war, to be fought between Aryans and the quote-unquote satanic Jews, and their allies. Likewise, extremists, who are convinced that the millennium will lead to a one-world government, may choose to engage in violence to prevent such a situation from occurring. In either case, extremists, motivated by the millennium, could choose martyrdom when approached or confronted by law enforcement officers. Thus, law enforcement officials should be alert for the following. 1. Plans to initiate conflict with law enforcement. 2. The potential increase in the number of extremists willing to become martyrs. And 3. The potential for a quicker escalation of conflict during routine law enforcement activities, for example traffic stops, issuance of warrants, etc.